Hablamos de condominios.
نحن نتحدث
Ang
الشقق.
condo bolte
我
hain.
们谈论公寓
Vorbim despre apartament.
ஸோ நாங்கள் காண்டோ பற்றி பேசுவோம்.
Parliamo di condominio.
We speak condo. So we're here with Ryan Grossman. Ryan is not only a real estate agent, but has a pretty strong background in the condo space. So Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves and introduce yourselves?
Sure. First and foremost, thank you for having me. Good to see you. So I am a realtor with Remax Realtron. I work across the GTA with buyers, sellers, landlords, investors. And really a big part of my job is to help my clients understand the markets clearly, not just looking at a unit and deciding to move forward on it, but really looking at pricing, inventory, buyer psychology, seller psychology, just so that my clients can make a more informed decision when they are moving forward with a purchase or a sale. But over and above me being a realtor, I'm also the co-founder of Condo Communities, which is a communication platform which allows residents and boards of condos and managers of condos to communicate more effectively and efficiently. And I've got a lot of knowledge on that condo industry, not just from real estate, but from being in condo communities as well.
And I'm sure that helps you on the listing side, especially in condo units, because you have a little bit more of an understanding than your typical real estate agent going into a condo building as to what you look for when you're representing your clients.
100%. I mean, you know, because we deal with a lot of boards on the condo community side as well, I can then explain or give knowledge to my clients on the real estate side about how boards work, what they look for, and so on and so forth.
And we are definitely going to talk about that. But I want to start with something that's very simple and probably a question that I would assume every buyer or seller of a condo unit, real estate in general, is going to ask their agent. And is it a seller's market right now, or is it a buyer's market right now? And keep in mind, we're filming this summer 2026.
Sure. So right now, I would say it's a balanced market. Okay, it's not a seller's market, it's not a buyer's market. It's balanced, leaning more towards the buyer's market. Very different from if we look back at the peak of 2022 when it was a seller's market. So today, it's definitely more balanced and favoring the buyer.
Why is that? Because I read recently, and maybe I'm reading the wrong articles, that right now the vacancy rate is at an all-time high at different condo buildings. Now maybe that's in the rental space and not the buying side.
Yeah, that's on the rental side. So, you know, again, if you look back over the past couple of years, vacancy has been quite low. And then what ended up happening was a lot of people moved out of the city. Foreign students are no longer coming to the city to occupy these spaces, and hence why you have a lot of vacancy compared to, you know, where it was. The rental market also it's a bit of a tougher market now because landlords who bought these investment properties, they have to cover their costs, okay, their mortgage, their maintenance fees. And if they're pricing their units too high to cover their costs and they're not willing to come down, well, the tenants in general will just not occupy those units because they're just too expensive. So until we see rental rates come down even further, I think you'll see the vacancy rates come down as well.
Do you think then that the higher vacancy rates on the rental side is making more people want to buy?
When you say like investors or end users?
Just end users, yeah. So for example, if there's going to be, in your example, a high rent rate that is going to be offered to potential tenants, is that going to necessarily drive them to rather purchase a unit rather than rent it, just because the costs end up to be almost the same when you look at everything?
I don't think so. I mean, there's so many factors, but no, I don't think so. I think, you know, if someone is in the market and can afford to buy, they will buy. And someone who, you know, cannot afford to buy or doesn't have the down payment will still continue to rent. And then you also have, you know, tenants who might only be in the city for 2 years and they're going to go work abroad as an example.
Right.
And they don't want to buy something.
Various factors that it's really hard to pin down, right?
Yeah.
But I guess that's the value of working with someone like yourself. You can sort of help the individuals or the families that are looking for whether they're going to buy a unit or they're going to rent a unit, sell or lease. You can sort of guide them. And I would imagine the different demographic versus the different location is going to make a big impact on that.
So many variables. I mean, there's many variables. I would also say, you know, for me, one of the things that I see is you have a lot of young families that want to rent. Okay. They don't have the down payment for a home or for a condo, but they want to rent a condo. And in downtown Toronto, one of the biggest problems right now is a lot of the inventory are very small 1-unit, 2-unit bedrooms, one bedroom, 2-bedroom units. And these families are looking for 3 bedrooms and bigger units. So they're kind of in a unique situation where they can't buy a condo, but there also is no product for them to rent. So it's
dicey. Yeah. I wonder that myself. So I live in a stacked townhouse right now.
Yeah.
And I used to live in a high rise. I've lived in a freehold home as well. And I wonder to myself, when I look at all the rising costs, you have your mortgage, you have your maintenance fees, you have, depending on where you live, utilities that you're paying for. Sometimes they're included in a condo's budget and their declaration, but sometimes they're not. And I wonder to myself, in my neighborhood especially, it's a lot of young families, maybe just starting out their families, or young couples. And I guess that sort of makes sense in terms of the size of the place that you're getting. But for these high-rise communities, and we see it in several condos that we've managed, we've even seen occupancy bylaws where you're restricted by the number of families or occupants that you can have in a single unit. And it does become difficult because there's only so much you can afford as a purchaser, whether you're buying or you're renting, where your cash flow is going. And if you have a big family, you're not going to be able to occupy a downtown condo. It's far too small.
No, and you know, the challenge is that a lot of these people work downtown too. So it's like they want to live downtown because they work downtown, but they end up having to go, you know, way north of the city to find, you know, bigger units in typically older buildings, because what they've built over the past 10, 15 years and, you know, call it the core of Toronto, has been, you know, the majority of units you're looking at like, you know, between 500 and, you know, 700 square feet. And it's just not doable for a family.
This is probably a unfair question, but in terms of square footage, do you find there's sort of a sweet spot or an average like cost per square feet for a condo unit in general?
I mean, the cost per square foot is going to depend on location. It's going to depend on the building. I mean, again, so many factors go into that.
So why don't we talk then just like trying to narrow down some of those factors. Why don't we talk about what happens for a first-time condo buyer? And we can use the example of it like a single person just because it's easy. And they would be going into a condo to try and buy something.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some of the factors that they would need to consider? Like what is the process like for you working with a real estate agent where you would actually go down the list to say, okay, what exactly do you want? How do we find you the right home for you?
Yeah. So I guess we're talking about like first thing, like criteria from the client, you know, what's the client looking for? And then what do they need to look out for when they're actually buying the condo? So from a criteria standpoint, I mean, again, everyone has different criteria, but for the most part, it's going to be the number of bedrooms, number of washrooms. Okay. Square footage, you know, does matter to some, not all. Location, of course, is important, but I guess the more important thing to look at is when I'm working with a client looking at a condo in today's market. So I'll actually just take a step back for a sec. So in 2022, you know, the market really was like what I like to call the fear of missing out. Okay. A condo would come on the market. Everyone would rush to buy it. They really wouldn't look at maintenance fees. They wouldn't look at the overall building. They wouldn't look at who's managing that property. They would just purchase in hopes, or I guess at that time it was, you know, the optimism that the real estate market was just going to continue to rise. So they didn't look at all those other factors. In today's market, if I'm coaching a client and I'm taking them through this process, we now have to look more carefully at, because we have the time now to look at, can you actually afford the carrying costs here? You know, let's look at the overall building that we're looking at. There's just because buyers have more time today, they should be doing more due diligence today.
They have a greater luxury essentially when they're making an offer than they used to.
100%. And not just that, but they can also add in conditions now, right? I mean, the status certificate condition, it's standard, But, you know, back in 2022, you wanted to put an inspection condition in there. You wanted to put a financing condition in there. If you did, another buyer is going to get it if they put a firm offer in, right? And that's all changed today. So when I'm, again, working with that client today, it's not just looking at the four walls of that individual unit. It's looking at the entire property. And then, of course, all the carrying costs that come along with that.
You know, it's funny you talk about offers because you made me recall my house hunt, and I would say maybe it was 21, 22, but it was in that volatile market where exactly as you describe it, I went through that experience, and I remember house hunting, and I found this great house that I loved, and we put an offer in, and we didn't get it. And my agent at the time, you know the story, but we'll share it. You checked in with the seller to ask them, okay, well, how do we lose this offer? And I think we lost it by $5,000. We were actually, no, I lied. That's a different. We did this.
I think we did this a couple times. Yeah.
I think we were the best offer by 40 or 50 grand, and they gave it to a cheaper offer.
With no conditions.
But it goes deeper. I remember when we had the conversation, that person had written a letter to the owner saying, well, we're going to move our family in. They sent a photo of the mother, the father, the child, and they had a little dog in it. And they said how much they want to buy the property. Turns out later, a year later, I see that property on a professional house hunting Instagram profile, and they've done a renovation and they flipped it. And it made me realize for the next house, we're going to have to do a letter. And it was a genuine letter, but we had to go really above and beyond just to secure a house at that time. Things have changed now, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I call that the love letter, the one that you send in or that people used to send in. It's really to differentiate themselves from the next buyer. You know, in this market that we're in now, it's
not relevant, you would think. No,
it's not relevant. I see it on the rental side still a lot of times, but on the purchase side, yeah, I mean, it really just comes down to dollars and cents. That's what the sellers care about.
So let's say that we're in a situation now that the buyer that's working with you has now identified the factors that are important to them. So location, number of bedrooms, maybe they have specific amenities at the building that they really like, but I imagine that's not a huge factor. It's mostly the carrying costs, as you stated, and location.
Amenities could be important to some. Yeah.
So what happens next after they've gone through that checklist with you? Like, how do we zone in on the right space for them?
So once I have the criteria from the client, what I will start to do is pull together listings or active listings that meet the client's criteria. And one of the things that I always suggest, even if a client says, if I send them a list of 10 units and they say, I only like 2 of these units, I always suggest we see maybe 5 of the units. Why? Because seeing any product or you just seeing units on pictures tells one story, but you have to go in and see other units, okay? Even if they're not of interest to you, just go see them out so you have something to compare to the units that you actually are interested in. But once I send them a list, what we'll do then is we will schedule a time to go out and take a look at these units. And again, it's not just taking a look at the unit itself, it's taking a look at the corridors of the building. What kind of shape are they in? What does the lobby look like? What kind of amenities does the building have? Is it in good shape? Anyway, so let's say we end up identifying a unit that they like. Are you now asking what the next step is after that?
I am, but you said something there that I find interesting and maybe we should dive a little deeper on. So you mentioned looking at the corridors, looking at how the building is kept. Are there other things that you look for that, a purchaser might not necessarily know that you can point out to them when they're actually walking through the building before they actually zone in on that specific unit that they want to put an offer in?
I mean, I think I've covered the majority of items that I will look at, but one of the biggest things for me that I don't think people think about is you have to understand when you're buying a unit, you have to think about what's going to happen when you want to try to sell that unit years later. Meaning you have to see the resale potential of it. A lot of people will say, this unit is great for me. Right. I love this unit. But I always then say to them, yeah, you love this unit and you should. You're going to be living in it. But is this 500 square foot condo going to be attractive to the next buyer when you go ahead and, when you want to sell this? That for me is the most important, because if they buy it today and life changes and they want to move and they come to me 5 years from now and say, Ryan, let's sell it, and we can't sell it, we shouldn't have bought it in the first place.
Right.
So it's really resale value that I look at over and above the other items that I've mentioned.
That's very good advice. And is there a way that you can preserve, again, loaded question, is there a way you can preserve resale value, or are you just at the mercy of the market?
I think it's on the type of unit that you are buying, and today I'll give you an example. Like, I have a client, single guy, but he wants to buy a 2-bedroom, not a 1-bedroom. Why? Because I've explained to him that when you want to go ahead and sell this in the future, there's going to be a bigger buyer pool for 2 bedrooms than 1 bedroom. So I think it's more so about the unit itself versus, the aesthetics or what they've done in the unit. You can always paint, you can always add new floors, you can always add new appliances, but you cannot change the structure or the size of a unit.
Okay, so now we've got a buyer that's identified a unit that they like. They've gone through it. You've cautioned them on the resale value. What is that next step? Are we putting an offer in? Are we looking at financing? Like, what comes next?
Again, I think every buyer is a little bit different, whether you're a first-time home buyer or whether you're a seasoned buyer. If you need financing on your property, I always recommend, even before we go out to see those units, I always recommend that you have some sort of pre-approval in place. So you don't necessarily need to have the financing, but you need to know exactly what you can afford.
Right.
Okay. Because a lot of times what I do see is I'll say to a client, have you been pre-approved? No, we haven't been pre-approved, but we know that we can afford it. Everything's all fine. And we'll go out and we'll see the unit. And let's say the unit's, $600,000 and they've been approved for $500,000. They just get disappointed. And I just don't want to disappoint my clients. So most important thing right away is to get your financing in place, get your pre-approvals in place. And now you can go out and you can shop confidently, because if you see a unit that's within your range, you're going to be actually able to purchase it.
Right. Okay. Makes sense.
All right.
So get a pre-approval, understand your budget so you don't feel that disappointment, because then you're sort of wasting your time looking at condos, unless you want to really extend your budget, which probably not the smartest idea. Some people do it because they really love the space, but you may be pushing a little too hard.
Yeah. And I would also say, just on the financing side, the other advantage to getting the pre-approval is that if you feel confident in your pre-approval, when you are putting your offer in, you do not have to add a financing condition in your offer because you've been pre-approved.
So you have a more attractive offer, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now what you're able to do, I always say this, the more conditions you have in the offer, the higher the price you're going to need to offer.
Right.
The less conditions you have, the less you're going to need to offer.
Gives the seller comfort.
Yeah, because the seller knows if you don't have a financing condition in there, that's not going to be a obstacle throughout the process, right? So I think getting the financing done before we go out and shop or before we go out and look, again, is important, because for one, what you're going to be able to afford, and then the follow up on that is if you do feel confident, you don't have to include that in your offer as a condition.
So let's talk about the offer then. We've sort of touched on it a number of times, but what does an offer look like for a buyer? How does that process work when they're making an offer to purchase a unit?
Yeah, so I will sit down with them and we'll talk about first and foremost price. And how do we arrive at price? We're going to go through comparables. We're going to go through our analysis or my analysis on my side. And I will give my buyer, a number that I think would at least get the ball rolling in the offer process.
Right.
So we come up with price. We figure out closing date. And then essentially we figure out conditions. The one condition that needs to be in there, of course, is going to be a review of status certificate. I will never let a buyer of a condo buy something without reviewing the status certificate. But once I get all the details from my client, I will put the offer together and then I will review that offer with the client. They feel good about it. They sign off on it. And at that point, we're then going to submit that to the seller or to the seller's agent. Okay. And in our offer, we put in what's called an irrevocable period. The amount of time that the seller in this case has to action your offer. I'll give you an example. Let's say we put an offer in today and the irrevocable was tomorrow until 1 p.m.
Right.
That now means that as the buyer, I'm locked into this at a minimum until 1 p.m. tomorrow.
Right.
And as a seller, you have up until 1 p.m. tomorrow to either accept our offer as is, counter our offer, or not touch the offer at all and just let the offer die.
Right.
So that's typically the process.
So are there strategies then when you craft that offer on modifying those variables to get a good outcome for your client? I know, again, all of these questions are super broad because real estate can be so specific as to what you're doing, but I'm sure there are some practices that you use in a general sense to help get your client the best price.
Yeah, I think you have to look at a couple of different things, right? Like how long, I think here's the first thing. How long has the unit been on the market for? Okay, so let's say the unit's listed at $600,000. It's been on the market a day. Am I going to advise my clients to submit an offer at $525,000?
Probably not.
Okay, but if that exact same unit has been on the market 60 days, 90 days, could I then submit an offer at $525,000 without insulting the seller? 100% I can, because they're in a different mind frame or mindset now, right?
That's what you mentioned, the buyer seller psychology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then one of the other things that you want to look at is a lot of times the seller will put up what they want as a closing date, a preferred closing date, right? So let's say they want a closing date of 60 days. And my client, the buyer, is able to provide the 60-day closing. Again, we can come down on price because I'm giving the seller something that they want. But if I came in and it said, okay, I'll give you $525 or $550, and it's going to be a 90-day closing, again, they probably won't look at it. So you really have to look at, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the seller and think about, if I was a seller, what would I be willing to negotiate on, and then craft the offer based on that.
And I guess that's why buyers and sellers should be working with an agent, because this is what you guys do for a living. You have the experience. Whereas if we're just on the street, me or a friend of mine, and we want to buy a condo, we may not be in the headspace to understand all of these different factors. But are you permitted as an agent to have conversations with the seller's agent to try and figure out what's in the seller's head to try and get the best price? Like, how does that work? Yeah,
you can ask any question you want. It's a matter of, does the seller or the seller's agent want to disclose or answer those questions? The only, or I would say what cannot be disclosed is if we put an offer in on a unit and that unit already has another offer on it, the selling agent cannot disclose to me what that other offer looks like.
I see.
Okay, but if there's no other offer on the table, yeah, of course, I'm going to have a conversation with the seller's agent. I want to find out about the motivation. Why do they want to sell? How quickly they want to sell? I want to find out when they bought it, how much money they would actually like to make on this. Like, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that will essentially, help with the offer process.
Right. And I suppose you do that before you even craft the offer. So you come prepared with as much info as possible.
Of course. I don't think, some realtors might not like me for saying this, but I'll say it anyway. I don't think, it's not that I don't think, the value of working with a realtor is not for the realtor to open up doors of a condo unit for you. Here is the bowling alley. Here is the swimming pool. That's not the value. The value is all in the back end work that we're doing, such as what we're talking about, to make sure that we're giving our client the best shot at purchasing something for the best price. Right? That's what's important.
Yeah, market awareness, negotiation, and just having that strategy.
Exactly.
And communication, ultimately, right? Like,
Huge.
You're communicating on behalf of the client, but you're also trying to interpret what the seller is trying to get.
It's finding that balance, right? And then sometimes you're going to have stubborn sellers. No matter what you do, they're stuck on their price. And then those units typically end up sitting on the market for longer periods of time.
So why don't we switch gears and talk about the sellers a little bit? Because we've been talking a bit about the buying process, but what does it look like for someone who wants to sell their unit? Is it very similar?
Again, so like if I were to compare like both markets, the 2022 market to today's market, you know, in 2022, if a seller decided they wanted to sell their condo, put it on the market, don't do anything,
It's gone.
it's gone.
Yeah.
It's going to sell.
Yeah.
Okay. Today, it's the complete opposite of that. So today, as a seller, you have way more competition. Okay. Which, you know, because you have more competition, you need to make your place or your unit shine over and above all of the others in the market. Most important for a seller today is going to be pricing. Every buyer is very price sensitive. Every buyer knows that the market is down since 2022.
Right.
Since 2022 to today, you know, the condo market is down roughly about 20%.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
It is. So, you know, if you as a seller are going to be pricing your unit as if it was still 2022, then that's going to sit on the market all day long, and you won't even have showings. Okay.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the first thing. You have to be priced correctly as a seller. But not only do you have to be priced correctly, but the unit itself needs to be in good shape. You need to, you know, paint those walls. Okay, maybe stage it a little bit, clean it up. If there's even little repairs that need to be done, even small ones, fix them, because buyers will notice. And if they notice it, and they'll be like, okay, well, now in my eyes, I have to spend money to fix that. And there's 50 other units that I can go to that are not going to have this issue. So I'm just going to go look at another unit.
It's a small deterrent, but it's still a deterrent.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. So I would say from a selling perspective, it's going to be your price, know what others have sold for in your building as of recent. Make sure that the unit is in good shape. And if it's not, you know, declutter it, paint it, all the things I've mentioned. Do all these things before you go to market, because if you are going to be lazy, and some people are just busy, and they still want to sell their home, and I get that. But if it doesn't show well in this market, it's not going to sell, again, because there's just a ton of other competition. I think that, you know, as well, I'm just looking at my notes here. Yeah, the other thing you really need to make sure that either you, if you're selling it on your own, or your agent is selling it for you, get proper photos done.
Yes.
It's all too often where I will see other listings and the photos are being taken by a phone.
Yeah. It's not Facebook Marketplace.
It's not. You it's not. And when it goes up on the MLS and it goes up on realtor.ca and thousands of people are seeing it, you absolutely want to make sure that it shines.
So I remember you cautioning me on this. I was on a flight and I was leaving. I think it must have been April of last year. And you said earlier, make sure you go see the unit when you're buying. Don't buy in pictures. But I really liked this unit. It was in this location I really liked. It was close to some people that I knew, and the photos were gorgeous. And I said, put an offer in. You're like, Nick, don't. See it when you come back. It sold before I could see it. But in retrospect, yeah, that would have been a very foolish decision. But the photos were done so well. I think they took a wide angled lens, so it makes the space look larger than it actually was. And I mean, those are some of the issues where you're not necessarily familiar with photography, so you wouldn't know, well, this space is actually a lot smaller when you stand in it. Oh, the sun hits in this direction, and that might be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what kind of person you are. Like if you work night shifts, you don't want to be in a place that has huge natural light, or vice versa. You might love that, and if it doesn't hit the right way and you've got shade, that could be a big factor too.
Yeah, and then that goes back to like the buying side too, right? It's like that's why you do need to see the unit and not just go off the pictures.
Do you generally try to see the properties at specific times of day? Does that make a difference? Day versus night, seasons? Sometimes you don't have that luxury, obviously, with the seasons.
I always suggest that you see a property during the day. Okay. You know, if we have to go in the evening, we will. But then if we're going in the evening, I'll always suggest to my clients that we find another time to go back during the day. To your point, you know, you want to see the natural light that's coming into the unit. Also, natural light could point out some other deficiencies in the unit that you might not see if it is nighttime, as an example. As far as seasons go, I mean,
You're stuck pretty much with what you got, right? If it's on in fall, you're not going to wait till summer. It's not even going to be in the market at that point.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think, the downside to like looking at a condo in the winter time is, you're not going to go out on the balcony and sit down and see if you like the view, but the view will be important to you in the summertime. So seasons, you can't really get around that.
Yeah.
But as far as like the time of day that we're seeing the unit, typically you want to see it, during the day.
Okay, so a seller is now decluttered, they've painted, everything's ready to go. They're working with you to find that price. Now they post it on MLS to get pictures, presumably. They go through all those steps.
Yeah.
What comes next? I mean, I presume people are going to want to look at the unit. When do you do sort of an open house, or like what strategies do you use to try and get attention to the product that's being put on market?
Again, I think it depends on the product that you are selling. I would say, it's fairly rare to see open houses in
A condo,
condos. It happens from time to time. But it's really going to be up to the agent now to promote that listing throughout their network. Use other online mediums to promote that listing. I would say, again, at a very high level, realtor.ca does a very good job of bringing in views on your unit or on your home. But essentially, once a buyer finds your unit, they will then speak with their agent, and that agent will then book a showing. And once that showing is confirmed, then the buyer agent and the buyer at that point will go through the unit. It's really like, I don't know if I've answered your question there, but it's as simple as it is.
No,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Just for those that maybe have not purchased a condo before.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the listeners, I assume, have lived in a condo, are owners. Some may be tenants and are looking to buy and don't know what the process is like for first-time condo buyers or sellers. So I think that there's some value to understanding the process from both the buyer side and the seller side.
Sure. Yeah. So I would just say, like, if you are a buyer, or if you are thinking about becoming a buyer and you find a listing that you are interested in, reach out to your realtor. Your realtor will book it. You guys will go take a look at the unit. And then, after you take a look at the unit, you'll debrief. You'll tell your realtor what you like, what you don't like. And then it's either on to the next unit, or, hey, let's put some serious consideration into putting an offer in on this particular unit. Like, I don't want to overcomplicate it.
Right.
That's essentially, what it is. And your agent will guide you through that process. That's what we're here to do, essentially.
Now, are there strategies for the seller similar to the buyer, either when you review the offer that you're receiving, or how you even list in terms of accepting offers? Because I've seen differences where you've got just give me your best offer, or there's a offer guarantee or presentation.
Offer presentation.
Yes,
yeah.
that's what I'm. So how does it work for them? Like, what strategies can they use?
Yeah, so I would say, the two strategies are listed at the price that the seller wants. So let's say the seller is looking for 800,000. You list it at 800,000, or maybe you list it, a tiny bit more to allow for some negotiation. And we would then say we're accepting or looking at offers anytime. So if a buyer comes through, they want to put an offer in, they don't have to wait for a specific date. They could just submit their offer. Okay. And then you have this other strategy, which again was used more so in 2022. You're seeing it come back a little bit, not so much on condos, but on towns. I'm seeing a lot on towns, a strategy where, let's say the seller wants 800,000. What they will do is they will list it at, call it 699,000.
Right.
Okay. And then they'll say that we're not reviewing offers until 2 weeks from now. So even if you like the unit and you want to submit an offer, you cannot submit an offer until 2 weeks from now. Why do sellers do this? Sellers do this because if a buyer sees, wait, this is listed for $699, but all the other units are listed for $799. I have to go see it. By using this strategy, it brings more buyers through the door.
Right.
Okay. The downside to that is that it also upsets buyers, right? Because you're going to have a buyer calling me and saying, okay, Ryan, I want to see this unit. It's $699. But then I need to explain to them, yes, they've listed it at $699, but they're really looking for $799. And then I have to explain why this is happening. So from a buying perspective, it's horrible.
Right.
Absolutely horrible. But from a seller's perspective, running that with that strategy essentially just brings more buyers through the home.
And potential that you might get an offer you actually like. But you probably will also get a lot of lowball offers too. So maybe that's not as attractive as it sounds.
It happens. I mean, that does happen, right? Because like, let's say the seller's looking for $799. They're listed at $699. The buyer agent brings them through and they're like, okay, yeah, we'll offer $699. And the buyer agent tells them, well, no, they really want $799. And then the buyer's like, no, it says $699. I want to put it in at $699. Yeah, the seller's going to get a low ball offer, but that's I guess the not the risk, but the downside of running kind of like an offer presentation. I personally believe that when you list a home, you have to list it at the price that the seller wants, because that means now that you're only going to get people through that home that can afford in and around that price.
Yeah, why waste both of your time, both the buyer and the seller, if it's not going to work anyways?
Right.
It's not really deceiving, because if you're with an agent, they understand it, but you're kind of creating this false narrative of what you're putting on market.
Yeah, you are. And then I would also say that, like, when you are, holding back offers, one of the advantages to a seller, and again, it doesn't work so much in this market, but the big advantage is, if you have on offer presentation day 5 offers, well, now we can kind of play those offers off one another essentially, right? If you put an offer in and you're the only offer, you know that you have pretty good negotiating power, right? But in the same scenario, if there's 5 offers on the table and you're a buyer, you might say, what do I need to do to beat out these other 5?
Right.
And they're all thinking the exact same thing, and that drives up the price.
But does that allow the seller then to go back to them and say, hey guys, thanks for your offers. You guys all need to do better. There's 5 of you, compete.
They could do that, but they need to give every single agent that opportunity.
What prevents them from just lying? And there's 2 people at the table and they say, you know what, there's 7 offers here. You guys got to do better.
What's preventing the seller's agent from lying, like saying that they have 7 offers, but they only have 2?
Yeah.
In the moment, there's nothing preventing them from saying that. But if the buyer agent really wants to find out if they did in fact have 7 offers, there is a way for them to find out after the fact.
And then the license must be affected for the seller's agent.
It's a bit of a process to find out if there were those other offers, but of course it is possible. And it's a great question. I get asked it all the time. It's very much looked down upon. It's illegal.
But I'm sure.
immoral.
I'm sure it happens, right? I'm sure there are horror stories on both sides that you've experienced and colleagues have experienced. I mean, it's going to happen. I'm sure.
It's happened to me plenty of times, and I question it. I question it, but then more so, you hear from your buyers. Like, what do you mean? I don't understand. You said there were 5. Now there's 7. Why is there 7? You said, and then you have to explain that to them. They don't care that you're going to go after the fact to find out if there were other offers on the table. They want to know now because they want this unit. Yeah. So yeah, it does happen. I would say not often.
Not often, yeah.
But it does. So you got to be careful, yeah.
So let's say that the offer has now been accepted, whether you're the buyer or the seller. Maybe we'll put ourselves in the buyer's shoes again, because I think it's a little more, there's a few more steps for the buyer. So offer is put in, 60-day closing. So they're going to take possession of the unit in 60 days. Offer's been accepted. Everything's done, signed, right? So presumably you send something via DocuSign, or there's some sort of contract that's entered into both parties. They agree to wire certain funds to the other party. The bank also comes in and provides the funds if they're getting financing to ensure that the full purchase value has been met and a closing date is established. So obviously there's a move process. We'll get to that. But during that period, I understand that there's the ability for the buyer to come to the unit a few times, even after they've signed the deal, right? Do you suggest that they take advantage of that? Are there any issues they should be looking for when they come and look at the unit again?
Yeah, I think as part of the initial offer, you have to put in that, the buyer reserves the right, as an example, to view the unit an additional 4 times prior to closing, as an example. That needs to be in the offer. Okay.
If it's not, they can't come.
If that's not in the offer, then, now you're asking the selling agent, hey, can we come by? And they could just say no, because we don't have it in writing. So first thing is to make sure in the offer that you have booked buyer visits, is what we call them. Okay. I find that buyers do buyer visits for 2 main reasons. One, they want to make sure, they want to take measurements, right? I'm buying new furniture, need to take the measurements, or I'm buying new appliances, whatever the case might be. So I would say for measurements and potential renovation plans.
Right.
Okay. And then the second main reason why you do a buyer visit is, what I always recommend is, let's visit the unit 1 day prior to closing.
That's very smart. Very smart.
Right? Because you're moving in the next day. Let's make sure all the appliances that were mentioned in the initial offer are still those same appliances. Sometimes people switch them out.
Oh, they do.
It's happened.
Sneaky.
Okay. So, you got to make sure of that. You want to make sure that there's no damage, especially if you're buying a unit where tenants have lived in that unit. Okay. And everything's all good. And then a day before, the tenant's upset. They have to move out for whatever reason. And they're like, we're just going to make a mess. And I'm not generalizing. I'm just saying and giving an example. But there's a mess and there's damages. And then we come for that final buyer visit. And this is not what we purchased. This is not what we ordered, essentially. Yeah, at that point in time, there'll be a conversation between the buyer agent and the seller agent to rectify the situation prior to us now closing the next day.
So that's very important. And it reminds me, when I sold my house a couple years ago, I had that exact issue happen to me. So the day of my move, the day before my move, we had that final visit by the buyers. And they came in and I did not know, but I had a leak in my basement. So my condensate line from my HVAC system had overflowed and caused some water damage on my floor. And they wanted to either get out of the deal, squeeze me for extra dollars, or move the closing date because they wanted me to ensure that I fixed the unit. And I scrambled, and thankfully I have the resources that, work in the property management space. I can call a plumber, so I got everything tidied up, but put a immense pressure right the day before I had the move, and created an issue for me where I had to
push out the closing.
I maintained the closing, but I had to max out all my lines of credit to make sure that I could satisfy it because I wasn't getting the funds from the buyer. They were tardy on it. I got it like the next day. And it was a whole thing, but managed to make it work. But I think it's difficult for people who are living in condos, especially because they're living in a box in the sky. Maybe you're in a townhouse, but in this example, you're in a box in the sky. You don't know what your neighbor's doing above you. You don't know what your neighbor's doing below you.
That's a great point too.
And you've got common element piping and windows and a whole bunch of things that could potentially go wrong that are outside of your control. So even if you're looking at your toilets and your bathtub faucets and everything, making sure that they're not leaking, common problem in condos is you're going to get leaks from a unit above you. Sometimes it's because someone overflowed a washing machine. Sometimes it's a leak in the common element pipe that's servicing the whole line of units from the top to the bottom. And that floods your unit. And then what are you supposed to do?
I mean, thankfully, I've never been in that situation.
Watch, now it's going to happen next week.
I mean, hopefully it doesn't. Are you speaking of, the day before we noticed this? Or or on closing?
I'm speaking very rhetorical, worst case scenario, the day before closing. I'm using my example and putting it into a condo now. Poor condo owner wakes up in the morning and they've got a flood in their unit, but they're supposed to close tomorrow. And today they've got someone coming to inspect the unit before closing. That could be a huge problem.
I'm not closing on that.
Yeah.
In that situation, I mean, it can get very complicated in that example, but in that situation, to just keep things simple, it would be we're not getting, there's an issue here.
Yeah, the product you've sold me is changed now because there's damage.
Correct.
Right?
And we're either going to give you an opportunity to rectify this, and we're going to push out the closing date. In some instances, some buyers might not even want, some buyers will try to get out of the deal if they notice a flood of some sort. It's rare that it's going to happen. But most of the time, the seller will rectify it. The buyer will, and their buyer's agent will come in and they'll make sure that the work that's been done is that it looks good and that the issue has been resolved, and then they'll go ahead and close on it. But that would just be really bad luck.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
if
yeah,
if that happened.
that would be very bad luck. But we also have real estate lawyers that are involved in the whole process here, right? Which we haven't really touched on. But I imagine in a situation like that, let's say there was this dispute that could arise, that maybe the buyer now is saying, hey, I don't even want the deal anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe they overextended their budget, and now that they see that, they're like, you know what? I was looking for a reason to get out of this thing because my life circumstances have changed in the last 60, 90 days during the closing period. You have a real estate lawyer that is part of this, that ensures that the land transfer documents are issued, so the title change is done with the land registry office.
Yep.
I imagine they could also provide some support or some advice in these kinds of situations, no?
They would. Like, it wouldn't be the realtors. At that point, the realtors would kind of back out of the situation. They'll be on the sidelines, but it's now really going to be up to the buyer's lawyer and the seller's lawyer to figure that out and work that out. And even before that, with condo, the buyer's lawyer is going to be involved even before we get to that point, because they're going to be the ones that are reviewing the status certificate for the building.
So let's talk about the status certificate, because we glossed over it.
Yeah.
And we have a whole episode dedicated to status certificate. But for those that haven't listened to it, or for those that aren't familiar, what is a status certificate?
It's probably a question I should be asking you versus you asking me, but
I'm interviewing you today,
okay.
So it's balls in your court.
So essentially, a status certificate will give. Okay, so when a buyer purchases the condo, conditional on receiving the status certificate document, what that means is now property management of that building needs to put together this essentially document that outlines the financial health of the condo building, how much money they have in their reserve fund, how much money they have in their operating fund. Are there any special assessments that are going to be coming up? Have there been any, capital projects that have been done or are going to be coming up in the future? All of the, financial worries that someone might have about buying condo, the status certificate will tell you or give you an indication as to the overall health. I've been in many situations, or lawsuits. If there's any lawsuits pending against the condo corporation as well, that will be shown in the status certificate. I've had many situations where deals have fallen apart because of the status, but that's okay, because that is the point of the status certificate, right? Again, if you go back to 2022, people were still reviewing status certificates, but it was like, yep, looks good. Let's move forward. Today, I would say, the lawyers are always reviewing it in detail, but the buyer might not want to be hearing what the lawyer's telling them,
course, yeah.
Right? And today, the buyer's listening to absolutely everything. Why? Again, because if this is not going to be the right unit, it's okay. I have 100 other units to choose from.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what a status certificate is. And then, should I continue?
No, yeah, please.
So what ends up happening is, once the lawyer has reviewed the status and discussed their findings with the buyer has two choices. They could either say, we need more clarity, and we got to talk to property management to find out what's happening in this building. They could also say, you know what, we're satisfied with the status certificate. Let's fulfill our offer. Let's fulfill our condition, and move the process forward. Or they could say, look, you know what, like, the status certificate is atrocious. I don't feel comfortable moving forward. We are not going to fulfill the condition. And at that point, the deal is dead and the deposit is refunded back to the buyer.
Yeah, status certificate is very important, as you said, for so many reasons. So if there is a special assessment coming up, as soon as the board has knowledge of a special assessment, whether it's being contemplated that we're going to charge every unit $5,000 to increase the reserve fund value. Once it's been contemplated, once it's been discussed, the condo has a duty to disclose that on the status certificate. And if they fail to disclose it, and a purchaser buys into a unit and then gets a special assessment levied against them, they're not entitled to pay it because they didn't have proper disclosure. And the trick becomes, when did the condo corporation have knowledge of the potential special assessment?
So who would end up paying that then?
Condo would have to eat it. The management company would essentially be liable.
The management company would be liable.
Depending on the circumstances, if there was a conversation and a status went out without disclosing it, then condo management is who prepares a status certificate. So they're going to be liable for that act of negligence, right? Very important. That's why we do it. That's why there's a fee to it, to make sure that it's done properly. But in the event that everything is properly disclosed, if a purchaser is buying into a unit at $699, but then there's a $10,000 assessment in the next fiscal year, well, they've got to factor that into their purchase price now. So I'm sure that happens. A status comes back and you say, okay, you know what? I see that there's an assessment. Our buyer is willing to buy the unit, but this $10K is a new cost. So we're lowering our fee by $10K.
100%. And then the seller at that point, they can make the decision. Do we want to lose this deal because of the $10K, or does the buyer have, a good point here, and we should discount it by $10,000?
Yeah,
that does happen.
I will see sometimes condo owners that have been in that situation. They just want to pay to get a clean status. They pay whatever balance that they have on an assessment, as an example, and then they have a zero balance. It doesn't show.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Versus, like a scheduled payment where that. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Which is the better move for a seller.
Yeah, because you don't have that.
You pay it off. You don't have it on the status. You're not giving the buyer any reason, not to move forward.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that I noticed with status, and then we'll change gears. We'll probably cover our last topic, which is going to be pre-construction, which is an interesting one now.
Yeah.
Status is the maintenance fees.
Yes.
So one thing that I have seen with condo lawyers, I should say real estate lawyers, they'll look at the status for those specific disclosure items. So what are the fees going to be like in the current fiscal? Are there contemplated changes to the maintenance fees in the new fiscal, which is usually a broad statement if a condo budget hasn't been produced yet? Are there assessments contemplated in the future or current? And are there legal issues? Those are the main things they're going to look at. What the real estate lawyer doesn't really have the background for is to look at the condo's budget, look at the reserve fund study, and make assumptions about what the impact to the condo fees are going to be in the next 1 to 3 years, maybe even 5 years. So I've done this for my mother, who is buying into a condo. And I said, make sure you get the status certificate and let me look at it, because I have the background in property management. I know these things. So she got the status, spoke to her lawyer. Her lawyer said, everything's good. We're going to move forward. I said, Mom, let me see the status, please. So she sends it to me.
You're a good son.
I'd like to think so.
Okay.
So I get the status. I look at it. I say, okay, everything seems good, but you should be prepared. There's probably going to be a 5 to 6% increase next year. And you're probably going to have like a 3% increase a year after, maybe another 3%. You see how it goes. Can't really predict it that far out. But based on your condo's budget and your reserve fund study, definitely you're going to have at least a 5 or 6% increase next year. She says, what? Why? My lawyer didn't tell me. They're not really, not that they're not supposed to, but that's not something that they would necessarily have the knowledge for, I don't think. They're looking at specific clauses in the status certificate to advise the client. But we have the practical knowledge to actually look at budget and reserve fund study and say, well, based on the corporation's financial position today, I know in the next year or two, you're going to have an increase of potentially X, depending on how your budget, your actual finances come in by year end. And I don't think a lot of real estate agents or real estate lawyers really factor for that.
Well, let me ask you, I mean, you look at probably a lot more status certificates than I actually review, because typically it gets sent out to the real estate lawyer. But are you saying that in the status certificate, it will not state that maintenance fees are going to increase X?
The obligation is only to make a comment in the next fiscal year if the corporation has knowledge that the fees will increase by a certain amount.
Okay.
Now, if they're in the middle of the fiscal year, they're month 6 out of 12, there is no knowledge. that they'll increase next year by a specific amount. So the broad statement that's included in most status certificates is we have no knowledge of circumstances that will increase the common element fees, maintenance fees for next fiscal year, except recurring budget expenses that may increase year over year. And that covers you.
Interesting.
But there's no commitment.
Interesting. So what you're saying is that because you're in the space that you're in, you're able to look at the budget and then determine based on the budget if fees will increase or not over X amount of years.
With some degree of accuracy, yes. But I don't think anyone's going to do that. Like I haven't seen the I keep saying condo lawyer. I haven't seen the real estate lawyers do that.
Yeah, I haven't seen them do that either unless, like you said, it's actually in the certificate that an increase is going to be made. I think you bring up a really good point. It's unfortunate. I mean, I'm just trying to think about it. Like, how important is that to the buyer? Like we know the buyer is going to know from me, just educating them on condo in itself. Okay. That maintenance fees will always go up. They will never go down.
Right.
Okay. And then the question always becomes, well, Ryan, what could I expect in regards to increases, in the long run? And I can never give them the answer because I don't know. But what you're saying is that if you use some sort of formula, then you can actually figure that out.
Yes.
So I need the formula.
We'll talk about that offline.
Okay.
I don't give all the secrets away.
Okay.
But I do think that what you just said is the point, right? The fact that someone is going to educate a buyer that you may buy into the property today at this cost and your cash flow is going to be Y, right? So you have to make your maintenance fee payments, which covers everything in the condo living there.
Yeah.
You have to pay your utilities, your internet, whatever it is, because each condo has maybe a different setup. You have your mortgage, you have your groceries, all that other stuff, right? But your condo fees are set at this number for the next 6 months, 12 months, whatever your condo's budget year is. Make sure that when you buy the condo, you know that in the next 3 years, that may compound 3% annually. Just use that as a hedge.
Okay.
Maybe it'll go higher. Maybe it'll go lower. Maybe you'll be lucky and you have a 0% increase to condo fees for 1 or 2 years. But generally what happens when you have that 0% is you kick the can down the road. And
then there's a huge increase.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I see that in data all the time when you look at condo boards that have tried to freeze fees and keep them at zero to make the ownership happy. It's an artificial short-term happiness. Sometimes it's done for political reasons because, they want to show to their condo owners that they've done a great job. Sometimes it's really good financial management and they're doing excellent, but that's like the 1% of the time. Usually if you're seeing a 0% year over year, there is going to be a catch-up year or catch-up years where you're going to have to factor for that because inflation cannot be avoided. So if your budget is $1 million today to operate your condo, next year it's going to be 1 million times whatever the rate of inflation is. Plus you've got increasing costs of utilities, you've got increasing costs of insurance premiums. That will always go up too. There's been a few times where it's been competitive where you can maybe get a savings, but generally insurance will go up, utilities will go up, contracts will go up, and you have inflation. All those things are rising costs. And as your building ages, you have more repairs and maintenance to do than you would if the building was younger. So everything to manage that property effectively is going to increase in cost. So how can you then not increase the payments that an owner is going to make towards upkeeping the building? Because the way you upkeep the building is collecting money from the people that live in it because they're all contributing their share, which is what makes up your budget. And that's how your money is used. So my long-winded point is, although there's no right way or right formula necessarily, there's a rough formula to assess what the increase to fees may be year over year. Just know if you're buying a condo, whatever your cash flow is today, what your expenses are today to pay for that space, they're going to increase every year.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And so, the advice that you give to that buyer is if it's $500 maintenance fee today, budget for $600.
Yeah.
Right? Budget for $600 because that means you'll be protected essentially for the years to come, okay, versus budgeting today for $500, knowing that they are going to go up.
Yeah, and you don't want to be priced out of a place that you really love in 5 years because you couldn't afford it because you extended past your budget to really try and get a place that you really like. And then sometimes you might have life circumstances. So what happens if you buy a unit, you get unemployed in a year or two, and now you can't keep up with those fees. And unfortunately, that happens. But I want to talk about one last thing before we wrap today, and that's pre-construction.
Yeah.
So we've talked about legacy buildings. I call them legacy buildings.
Which I would call resale.
Resale build. Okay.
Yeah.
Similar concept,
thing.
Different language.
Yeah.
Pre-construction, a little bit different. How does that process work? Because you're not representing the seller generally. The seller is the builder who sells the units through an agent to various buyers. But I'm sure you've represented specific buyers that are looking at pre-con units, no?
I've done a little bit of work in that space. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in pre-con by any means, but it's almost the exact same process. The difference is going to be how the deposits are made, okay? Because you're buying something today that's going to be built or be ready to be lived in 3 years from now. So deposit structure is going to be a little bit different. The overall process is going to be slightly different because in that process, you get to pick, your finishes, you get to do some customizations in the unit. I would say that for the most part, it's almost the exact same process, minus the fact that like the deposit structure is going to be different and you get to make some customizations.
And it's a little bit longer given that, right? Like, I mean, I suppose you could buy, depending on where they're at in the sales cycle of selling these units. If you're an early buyer, your deposits may be coming in over a 2-3 year period of the building being built, but you could still be buying into a building where they've got 5 or 6 units left for sale, but they're already constructed. And that way it's probably closer to buying a resale unit where you can have a 30, 60, 90-day closing.
For sure. For I mean, the pre-construction market has changed a lot since, again, 2022, 2021 even. Crazy stat, in Q1 2026, not one single new project has started to be built.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Okay. A lot of people who bought pre-construction were buying it solely based on the appreciation of that unit and not really looking at the cash flow. Again, it was more emotional. It was more, I need to get in. I know Toronto. I know prices are going to continue to rise. I'm going to make money on this unit. And, we all know what's happened. And now some of those same investors are actually underwater. So I think that the reason I bring this up just from a timing perspective is, my advice for any buyer out there, the advantage to buying pre-construction, okay, is no one's lived in the unit before. The building is nice and shiny. You might get it at a decent price, but typically it's going to be, in and around the same price per square foot as maybe some resale building. I always advise clients to buy resale or to buy legacy buildings. Is that what you call it? Was legacy? Yeah. Because you get to feel it and touch it and see it and be in it versus, the pre-construction, which is just buying it off a floor plan and hoping for the best.
Yeah.
Right. So, we can have a whole podcast just based on pre-construction, but for your viewers, I would say, today, I mean, there's not even that many pre-construction projects you could buy into today, but there still are a lot of people who are selling their units who bought pre-construction that want to unload them. And again, if a buyer were to buy those, they'd be in the exact same situation. They'd have to wait for that building to be built. So, to all the viewers out there, my advice is going to be to look more so at resale or legacy buildings than pre-construction.
So if anyone does want to reach you for some advice on the buying, the selling side, anything to do with real estate, how can they get in touch with you, Ryan?
You can either give me a call at 416-970-4777 or send me an email at hello@ryangrossman.ca.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day and good luck at the showing that you told me you're going to now that you're listing something, I think you said in Rosedale.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Have fun. Good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for having me. Really great to see you and chat with you.
You as well. All the best.
Thanks, man.